one point I'm born in Canada. I have a birth certificate. I have been on my mom's Canadian passport for 4 years. I have my own Canadian passport for 5 years. Under the Canadian Passport Act, you can only get a Canadian passport if you're a citizen. I got in trouble when I was 19 years old. I went to Ottawa College Detention Center. At Ottawa College Detention Center, I got an altercation with a guard over a newspaper. I was thrown in segregation. While I was in segregation, the guard came up to me and asked me if I was a citizen or not. At the time, I had a bigger beard and my hair was a little more popular. I told him, of course, I'm a citizen. I'm born in Canada. Once I got out of segregation, CBSA, Canada Border Service Agency, came to see me and stated that I'm not a citizen. I provided them a copy of my birth certificate and I provided them a copy of my Canadian passport. I would think that at that time they would stop. But they came back telling me that my Canadian passport was given to me in error. So 2 weeks later, I was classified as a long-term permanent resident. I contacted the minister. The minister stopped my deportation process until I got sentenced to 3 years. Once I got sentenced, the whole process had started. I was sent to Millhaven, and then from Millhaven, I was sent to Joyceville. Keep in mind that when I was sentenced, and I was sent to Millhaven and Joyceville, I was sent there because based on my status as well as dealing with immigration. I was not able to go to the border security. They kept me at maximum or high medium based on the fact that I'm dealing with immigration. I had an opportunity to go down or downsize to the border security based on that because I was classified as a flight risk and danger to the public. That being said, now once I'm at Joyceville, I went for a disability hearing. During the disability hearing, I provided evidence that I was born in Canada. I had 2 witnesses, the doctor that my parents worked for at the time, and the former high commissioner support. But yet, the adjudicator at that time felt that, basically said that it's above his pay grade and did not consider that type of evidence. And based on that, I was dictated that I was inadmissible in Canada. Now, once that was done, to me at that time, I had no status at all. Now, I went from Joyceville to Toronto West Detention. I just want to point out that I was from Ottawa, and it's a tactic that immigration is using, trying to isolate individuals like how they're doing in Toronto to Lindsay. All the family supports in Ottawa, but they sent me to Toronto. I went to Toronto. It took me about 5.5 months to get out on bail for detention review. I was released to my parents on conditions where they had to provide independent documents within 48 hours if CBSA wanted it. If CBSA called them in, they had to be there within 48 hours. So basically, they have conditions on themselves as well as me. I had house arrest from 9 to 9. I was not able to work. I was not able to do any training. I was not able to do any schooling. These are the type of conditions I had at that time. I also want to point out that while I was there, the only reason I got released was the fact that the adjudicator and CBSA representative stated that India at that time said that they're not issuing me no documents. But once I got out, I filed an access to information request form, and once I filed that access to information request form, it clearly stated that CBSA already knew 6 months prior to me even going to Toronto West Detention Center that India clearly stated that I'm not an Indian national and we're not issuing no documents. But they hesitated to say that to the adjudicator while when the detention review after 5.5 months, they finally said that at this time they're stating this and this and this. It's just a tactic that CBSA does and just detain people, I feel. Now, I was out on detention review on bail, and while I'm out on bail, I had to apply for a work permit. Even though I'm born in Canada, I have a social insurance card, had all the documents that any other Canadian citizen would have. While I applied for it, ideally you should get 3 to 6 weeks. Within 3 to 6 weeks, I did not get my work permit. I had to file a mandamus application in federal court. The average how many filed a mandamus application? It took 7 months before I got a work permit. So once I got the work permit, then I had to apply for a social insurance card. Service Ontario did not want to give me a social insurance card, so I contacted Thomas McClare's office. Thomas McClare's office got involved, and I got a social insurance card within 10 to 14 days later. That being said, at that time I also have a UN application filed by Saskatchewan Billy from CCLA, Canadian Civil Liberties Association. They had filed a UN application on my behalf based on the fact that my international rights are being violated. One of the conventions in 1961, the reduction of statelessness. Based on that, I am classified as stateless at this point. And then I have a charter application have a support committee, I have support from the public, I have a charter application in process, and I have a UN application in process. So my conditions got reduced to 3 conditions. Keep the peace, reside by a surety, and sign it once a month. Prior to this, I had to sign it every 2 weeks, and I had 3 pages of conditions. But note that to get these conditions down to 3 conditions, I had to increase my sureties from 2 sureties to 3 sureties. Sureties are bondspersons that sign, put up cash or a bond, and they're responsible for they're responsible for you. That being said, then at that point, I was able to work. But now, once I got a job, I started working, but my work found out that I had my status in Canada and the fact that I had a criminal record, so I lost that job. Prior to this, I also was, my tactic essentially now is to bring awareness and show the foundation that if they're trying to deport someone that's born in Canada, it puts citizenship itself in question. I'm born in Canada, I've lived here my whole life, and so I find it's ridiculous the fact that they're trying to deport someone that's born in Canada after the fact of 20 years. I made a mistake. I paid my debt to society, and I want to move on, but the whole process I wasn't given the process. Due for a process wasn't given to me. My Canadian passport was taken away just like that. All my ID was taken away. Everything was just taken away. So now, slowly but surely, I'm fighting back to get everything back. Driver license, social insurance card, able to work in Canada, go to school, get a job. And I'm going to federal court to seek declaration of citizenship, to get back my citizenship. And at this time, I also now go around, I did a speaking tour a little while back to bring awareness about my case, show the public, and try to get more support. Here today, also look for awareness and get support. And essentially, all at the end of the day, I always encourage individuals to help me out in the solidarity aspect in terms of writing a exceptions, but they're stating that my parents have diplomatic status and therefore I'm not considered a citizen. My argument to that is that my parents left the country, got a work permit in Boston, came back to the country, worked for a Canadian doctor, which the doctor has sworn an oath, and then I was born. The hospital was not designated as under diplomatic status essentially when you're born, and the former High Commissioner has also sworn under oath that my parents did not work for him. So therefore, their argument essentially, there's no argument there, but this is what they're standing by, is that my parents had diplomatic status, and this is the whole reason why now I'm going in front of court to prove to them that my parents did not work for the High Commission at the time of my birth, had a valid work permit, and worked for a Canadian doctor. To this effect, in September 18th, the former High Commissioner wrote a letter to the public, to the Canadian government, essentially stating that my parents did not work for him, in any capacity whatsoever from June 12, 1989. There's a video of it as well.
Yeah?
Of the press conference. Yeah.
Do you have anything in particular you would want to?
No, nothing particular.
Okay. And the only other thing I wanted to point out in the chronology that I thought was really important is you'll see here that obviously Deepan's citizenship really only comes into question after he's had a run-in with the law. And for the Civil Liberties Association, that's a real concern that citizenship stripping is being used as punishment for run-ins with the law. And that's frankly unacceptable. Citizenship is meant to be permanent at its core. That's how it guarantees you procedural rights. And you'll see that this only becomes a problem to him once he's had some run-ins with the law. And I think he spoke really importantly to how that's impaired your ability to live your life now that you've served your sentence.
Great time.
Is there anything else that you want to say right now, or let him go and we can go back in there?
Hello everyone, my name is Hassan, and I'd also like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered here today on the occupied territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Tupi, and Squamish people. Hello everyone, hello no one's illegal, who's mainly here, and thank you to everyone for coming out here today. As Charlotte mentioned, I'm speaking here today on behalf of No One Is Illegal, and for those of you who aren't familiar with No One Is Illegal, it is a migrant justice group here in Vancouver and operates throughout Canada or Turtle Island, and it is a group that draws leadership mainly from migrants and people of racialized backgrounds, and as a group we are dedicated towards combating the immigration control system here in Canada and elsewhere, dedicated to challenging detention, deportation, racial profiling, and we're dedicated to also challenging the exploitation of migrant workers here in Canada. So given the nature of the sort of organizing and activism and work that we engage in here, as No One's Illegal, I'd really like to focus my talk about Deepan and talk about Deepan's case within the context of migrant justice here in Canada and within the context of Canada as a colonial state, and talk about how Canada has a long history of discriminating against people of racialized backgrounds, against Indigenous people, or Indigenous stewards of this land, and talk about how Deepan's case fits into that larger pattern of discrimination and into that larger history. Now Deepan's kind of gone over the facts and he's done a good job of talking about the main elements, so I'm not going to go over that again, but I think there are some important points that I'd like to highlight again, as Deepan's pointed out. The fact that what is happening to him is in violation of the Citizenship Act, it is in violation of the Charter, it is in violation of international law. Canada as a state is the one that has rendered him stateless, and under international law they have an obligation to make sure that he isn't deported and that he is restored to his state of having citizenship again. I think it's important also to highlight, as Deepan said, that his parents, when he was born, his parents were not employed by diplomacy, were not employed by the Indian High Commission. Hence, for all intents and purposes of the law, Deepan is a Canadian citizen, and the Canadian state has arbitrarily and in violation of the law stripped him of that citizenship. And Apart from the legal aspects, I think it's really important to look at the rhetoric which is being used in Deepan's case, and how that rhetoric is a sort of rhetoric which echoes the sort of racist and discriminatory rhetoric that's used in the past, that has been used in the past against the Indigenous population in Canada and against people with racialized backgrounds, to deem them as being lower on the hierarchy of belonging here in Canada, to deem them as being less Canadian, and that's exactly what's going on here. And I think it's really important to not look at Deepan's case in isolation, but to look at it in the larger context of this history of discrimination. So this rhetoric, like I said, relies upon creating a hierarchy, where certain people, mainly people of European descent and origin, are deemed to be more deserving of being citizens in Canada and subsequently enjoying the rights, freedoms, and legal due processes that come with that. Whereas other migrants and other non-citizens, people mainly from racialized communities, are deemed as being less deserving of those rights, freedoms, and legal due processes. Now in Deepan's case, the sort of rhetoric the government is using centers around a sort of creation of a false identity for Deepan, an identity whereas he is deemed to be an Indian national and violated the law, and hence he should be punished for that by being deported back to Canada. Again, this is a total false narrative which has no basis in the facts. But again, I guess this sort of narrative and this rhetoric and the fact that he is being deported, as Charlotte said, raises a really, really important question, and that is of double punishment. Because as Deepan has pointed out, he's already served time, or he's already been criminally charged and served time in incarceration already, and he's quote unquote been punished already by the Canadian state, and now the Canadian state is again attempting to punish him by deporting him back to India, a country which he has very little connection to, other than the fact that his parents are from there. Now, what's problematic about this situation, and there's a lot of problematic things about this, but what's really problematic about the situation is not only how far the Harper government is willing to go to kind of construe the facts in Deepan's case and to outright lie about the fact that he's not a Canadian citizen. I mean, that's problematic for such a host amount of reasons. Like, couldn't they do this again, right? If they're willing to go this far in Deepan's case, who's to say that they would not arbitrarily strip other people of their citizenship in cases of, for example, activists committing acts of civil disobedience and protest the Canadian state? Would they be willing to do this again in that situation? It brings into the whole question of citizenship in Canada. I think that's really problematic. But I think what else is really problematic, and which I want to talk a little bit about, is the fact that behind this rhetoric is this message that as a migrant, as someone of non-status here in Canada, you not only are punished for committing a crime, but then you are further punished by the very fact that you are a migrant, that you are racialized, that you are a person of non-status, by being deported from Canada. That is a very strong and clear example of double punishment. Now, although Deepan's case is legally unprecedented in the sense that there hasn't been a case before whereas someone who was born in Canada of Canadian citizenship was arbitrarily just outright stripped of their citizenship. I mean, that hasn't happened before, legally speaking, or at least hasn't been documented. Unfortunately, what isn't unprecedented about his case is the fact that this government regularly engages in the act of double punishment against migrants and against people of non-status. And when I mean people of non-status or non-citizens, I mean this includes people who have lived in Canada for the majority of their lives as permanent residents, who have established families here, who have established communities here, who have established careers, and have very little connection with their country of origin. These people are, after committing a crime or some arbitrary crime, are then deported back to this country of origin, and sometimes face very precarious circumstances in this country of origin. They face further torture, further imprisonment, so it ends up being triple punishment in that case. And apart from those things, just face isolation and alienation because they have no connection to this country and have no community or family there. This is something which the government regularly engages in. And I think it's really important to point out that this double punishment represents a targeted assault not only on migrant communities, but on migrant communities specifically of racialized backgrounds. because they are overrepresented in the criminal justice system and overrepresented in cases of double punishment cases. So for example, I have a stat here. In a 2011 study of the Immigration and Refugee Board Appeals Division, where there was appellants facing deportation, there was around 151 appellants looked at in this case, and only 35, or 23% of these appellants who were facing deportation were of Anglo or Western European nations. The remaining 77%, or 116 appellants, were from countries that I guess you would deem as being non-white or non-European. Now, I think it's really important, again, to draw this connection between Deepan's case and this larger pattern of discrimination, because, again, it points to this hierarchy that exists where certain people are deemed to be more worthy of Canadianness and more deemed worthy of having a legal due process, which Deepan has been denied altogether. They didn't give him the right to answer to the evidence which was put against him. In fact, he didn't even know what the evidence was until he filed a number of Freedom of Information Act requests, which I believe there's still many outstanding. Right? I think he was filed over 50 or so. 61 Freedom of Information requests, the majority of which have gone unanswered. So he didn't even know the evidence, and he still doesn't know a lot of the evidence that's been used against him in this case, probably because there isn't much. So again, this also fits within the pattern of this Harper government's intentional sort of effort to increasingly pass laws and other measures which make it easier for it to be able to play this sort of role of a gatekeeper in deciding who is deemed a good citizen in Canada and who is deemed not to be a good citizen, and reinforcing this sort of sentiment that immigrants are only worthy of belonging here in Canada if they are good immigrants, if they're contributing to the economy, and sort of internalize this middle class, sort of hetero-patriarchal Canadian values, and if they at any time fit outside of that framework or question that way of living, they're deemed to be non-deserving and deported. I think a clear example, or a prime example of this is Bill C-24, which is currently before Parliament, which if passed will increase the residency requirement from 3 to 4 years, triple the application fee for citizenship, a clear economic measure to marginalize people who can't afford that, and will replace judges as decision makers in immigration cases with actual immigration officers, replace people who are supposed to be unbiased with very biased immigration officers from the CCSA and so forth, which gives them the power to revoke citizenship from naturalized persons if these officials believe that that person never intended to live in Canada. It also gives the government the power to strip citizenship from dual citizens if they're convicted of certain crimes, even if those convictions occurred outside of Canada, and even if they have sort of double time in incarceration for their crimes in Canada. Again, sort of bring forward this notion of double punishment. So they're really trying to make the immigration system into one that mainly serves employers, treating immigrations not as future citizens or members of Canadian communities and families, but merely as convenient or cheap labor here in Canada. And if you don't meet those standards, then too bad, you get out. And if you anywhere along the lines, are convicted, then you get out. And I think, again, this isn't any sort of new measure, though, right? This has happened throughout the history of Canada. We don't have to go too far back to look at South Asian and Chinese and Japanese laborers who came here to Canada under that model of strictly being seen as labor. And when they tried to establish lives here and communities and tried to actually be quote-unquote Canadian, they were punished for that. They were stripped of their citizenship. There were measures such as the head tax were put against them, but they were just arbitrarily deported. So this pattern of immigration controls and changing the immigration controls is what makes it increasingly easier for the government to do things such as what's happening with Deepan, where his citizenship is just arbitrarily taken away. And like Charlotte mentioned, this isn't a case that many people know about, and they should know about this. I think it's crazy that the government can just step in and just strip someone of their citizenship and that nobody's talking about it, that the media isn't talking about it. It's unprecedented. So, yeah, I think in closing, I'd just like to say that when we struggle for justice in cases such as Deepan's, we always have to contend contextualize it within this part of your history, because it makes connections with other migrant justice struggles, it makes connections with other cases of injustice here in Canada, and it makes the fight even stronger. And I hope we continue to do that, and I hope you continue to do that as you talk about Deepan's case, because there is a really underlying racist and racial profiling rhetoric that's going on here. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So our executive director, Josh Patterson, had hoped to be here tonight to deliver these remarks, but he's a new dad and his daughter got a really intense case of pink eye. So he's very sorry that he can't make it, but he's off being a good dad, and I'm happy to deliver these remarks on his behalf. And before I talk a little bit more about the Citizenship Act and the weakening of citizenship rights and what that means for people's lived realities, I think that Deepan touched on a number of really important and really excellent points. And one that I'd just like to talk about a little bit more is that we believe at the BCCLA that it matters very importantly where your case is heard, whose hands your life is in. So in part, the procedural guarantees, the rights that we expect people to have in the hardest moments of their life when they're going through criminal proceedings or when they're undergoing immigration and deportation, those same procedural guarantees are not guaranteed to you if all of a sudden you're not in front of a judge or a court, and instead you're in front of a bureaucrat, and if you're not dealing with a Canadian institution that has public oversight, and instead you're dealing with the Canada Border Services Agency, who has no public oversight, who is not accountable in the same ways. And so, again, I think it makes an excellent point that as soon as your citizenship status is in question, the very institutions that you deal with, and the many years we've fought to have strong protections in those institutions totally changes. So the carpet is pulled up from under you in that way, and in a really important and devastating way for people. So I did want to talk a little bit more about C-24, and in particular, its ability to weaken citizenship rights. So it reminds us, of course, of the many ways in which the human rights of individuals are predicated on citizenship, which I think on the one hand surely asks us to look beyond citizenship in order to achieve human rights, but it also asks us to, it also speaks importantly to the value of citizenship for people in their lived realities right now. We know that statelessness renders individuals vulnerable, and the surety and permanence of citizenship remains of vital importance in the lives of people. So right now, the federal government is in the process of changing the meaning of Canadian citizenship for the worst. On February 6, 2014, the federal government tabled Bill C-34, C-24, introducing sweeping changes to Canada's citizenship laws. We believe that this new law will turn Canadian citizenship upside down, in particular by taking away one of the key features of Canadian citizenship, and that is its permanence. It would give the federal government the power to revoke citizenship for dual citizens, of which there are millions in Canada, under certain conditions, and we believe that is profoundly unjust. Citizenship, Josh has to say, is one of the most important fundamental political rights because it forms the basis for the permanent enjoyment of all the other rights. We believe at the BCCLA, of course, that human rights belong to everyone, regardless of citizenship. People are people, and rights and dignity must be respected, regardless of how the law defines our status. But in practice, right now, citizenship will define your lived reality while going more people may be placed at the risk of statelessness, rendered vulnerable, and dragged through long and costly systems just to have some certainty about their residence and their rights. In December, we wrote to the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration to appeal to him to intervene on Deepan's behalf. Deepan was born in Canada and issued a birth certificate. He grew up in Canada, he had a Canadian passport, and he continues to consider himself to be a Canadian. If he can have his rights stripped away, certainly there are a great number of people living in Canada who must live in that same way. Now the government is telling him he isn't Canadian. They say they plan to deport him to India, but he doesn't consider himself to be an Indian national, and neither does India. He is at risk of statelessness, and that's why we're here. That most fundamental of rights, the right of membership in society, is at stake for Deepan, and it could be at stake for many more people because of this new law. We've asked the government to permit Deepan to remain in Canada, and we hope they will join us in this campaign. And I think that that is everything, Josh, from Josh. So we'd be really welcome to take questions, and I also want to say that we really appreciate anyone who has the time to take a support photo or to make the video. It will really amplify voices in this room if we take part. Maybe we'll start with questions.
What government documents do you hold, if any?
I hold a birth certificate and driver license.
So
And
that's,
and a temporary social insurance card.
so that's how you're able to travel on your driver's license?
Yes.
They haven't taken away your birth certificate?
No. They can't take away my birth certificate. They can take away my passport, everything else from me. They can't take away my birth certificate. So born in Salish, born in Salish, they can't take that away.
So I was under the impression that they claimed that they made the error with issuing the birth certificate, and that's what they want to take back as well. Is that incorrect? Or?
No, they're not claiming that my passport. They're claiming that my passport's in there. They're not claiming that my birth certificate's in there.
So if your birth certificate's not in error, I don't understand.
Okay. So, there's a loophole that they're saying that my parents have diplomatic status. So if your parents have diplomatic status, the child was born in Canada, not considered a citizen. But in my case, that's their claim. In my case, my parents do not have diplomatic status, and there's proof, and I have a sworn affidavit from the former high commissioner and a sworn affidavit from the doctor that they were working for.
Right.
The birth certificate, I'm born in Canada, they can't take that away from me. But they take away my passport because they're saying that I'm not considered a citizen. So when I took away my status, everything was taken with driver license, passport, social insurance card. When I reapplied for a social insurance card, there's an expiration date for 1 year, and there's no longer a 5 but one, there's a 9. So it's a clear indicator that I'm not a citizen, and the fact that there's an expiry date on the social insurance card. Canadian social insurance card, usually you have a 5 or a different number it starts with, and there's no expiration date. The social security I have now is a 1 year, valid for 1 year, and it clearly has an expiration date.
You have one, they give you another one, they give you another one, a new social insurance?
Yeah, they give me 2 social insurance cards, it took me 3 months to get my driver license, get the cord, and then get it working.
And I haven't even get my residence, I don't know. If I'm gonna rely in the cities, in the residence of Canada, it's like completely unbelievable. What I'm hearing is discrimination.
I want to say, the Canadian government, they never hesitated to give Conrad Black his citizenship back, you know. But for the average citizen, there's a different law, they don't have a chance to protect themselves. To retire, system there, is well below on the average citizen.
Yeah, and that's a very important point. It's a total two-tier system. If you have the money to buy citizenship, you can buy it. But that's not the case for many migrants here.
So they brag so much about like, see, Canada is no on sale. They brag now that nobody can buy citizenship in Canada. So they're promoting themselves that they can buy citizenship. It's contradiction. They brag that Canada is not for sale.
There's processes, for instance, you fast track. There's certain process you can go through the House of Commons, and you get, there's no waiting game for them. Depending on the financial, depending on the circumstances, they can fast track this issue instead of waiting for 4 years or 3 years after the fact, you get it in 1 year. Process in that. So there is fast track, but based on the fact that your financial outcome, basically where you are at the time.
Who's sponsoring this bill that we're having?
Sorry?
Who is sponsoring this bill?
So it would be the Chris Alexander, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, oversees. And I am gonna start by passing this around, and if you have anything you can contribute, I know Deepan would appreciate it greatly, and we can keep taking questions. And then when we run out of formal questions, for sure, let's send it back in if anyone is interested. Is there another question from the floor? So for your question about C-24 is a really good one. So as I said, that would be a citizenship and immigration bill, and just to give some context to its, where it is, its movement right now is it's already in committee. So if you are interested in speaking up about it, the committee is a good time. Personally, we don't have a lot of hope with the committee because it is a majority conservative committee, so of course there are party issues at play, but committee is a good opportunity to make your voice heard to members of the committee. So if you're interested, we will have more information about the bill in particular on our website tomorrow. So should visit us if you'd like to interact with the members of the committee.
I lost the beginning of the meeting. From what province are you coming from? Could you provide what province or where were you going?
On the board in Ottawa.
Ontario.
In Ottawa.
Ontario province, right?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Do they have different laws there? Maybe is that part of what the issue is?
This is fair.
Has there been any case or anything about this?
Good question. Do you have anything to say?
They are supportive
because you are not white, even though you are born here, you are considered as second. That's why, because of violation of the law, because of your former crime, that's why they try to keep you out of the country. I fully agree.
I think racial profiling here is a key element. I mean, like Deepan said, CBSA officers wouldn't have picked him out of that crowd of people, if he was
White.
European, British, or any other descent.
Same.
It was the fact that he stood out as a person of color that they singled him out to check his immigration status arbitrarily. So, not arbitrarily based on profiling. So, yeah, I think that is a key element in this case.
I also want to point out that in Ottawa, there's no screening process. And they don't ask people, they don't check your status when you go inside. When I went to segregation, a guard simply asked me, and then my belief that that's how it all started.
And that's why I hope you all know about this case, will sign this petition to stop much.
Sorry, I was listening to what you said earlier about, not being a citizen, but different procedurals within the court system. Okay, so I've never seen anybody that's gone through the court system that has walked in and handed an ID to anybody, birth certificate or driver's license. How do they know who's who? How does the court system know whether you're a citizen or not before you go through the procedure?
The cops do.
Yeah, the cops, like when you're charged with something, when you're taken to court, I mean, there's always an issue of identification that's raised prior to that.
You also need your fingerprints as well. So once you do your fingerprint, it gets sent to the system. If you don't have citizenship, it comes up on the computer right at the police station.
But not everybody gets fingerprints, so
Whether you're getting charged or getting pulled with DOI,
Yeah, exactly.
it's standard procedure for them. Now, recently Toronto, it was to change as well. You pull people and ask for your ID and see if you're a citizen or not. New policies came into effect just recently. But prior to this, they ask for your ID simply to see if you're a citizen or not.
but there's a lot of people on the downtown east side that don't possess any government ID, so how do they get to confirm just based on,
There's a number of people who work here in the downtown east side, so maybe I'll let them speak to that more.
yeah, I'm just trying to see how because the cops don't determine citizenship, because a driver's license doesn't mean citizenship, they're not looking at your birth certificate.
When cops run ID checks, if you have an outstanding immigration warrant, it will show up. So cops' records are cross-checked with immigration.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's becoming, like Deepan said, it's becoming an increasingly more trend where cops are asking for ID, not only cops but transit police, right? When you pull over now, or you're taken aside for not having a ticket on the SkyTrain, they check for ID, they check for citizenship as well. And that's being sort of a key point where a lot of people non-status are being picked up by the CBSA is on the SkyTrain.
So where is the law, I don't know if you can answer this, that mandates citizens to carry ID at all times? I don't believe there is one, or I've never seen it.
No, there isn't one, and you're not required to identify yourself unless you're actually being detained or arrested, and under that situation, you are required by the law to identify yourself, but you're not required to carry your documents around with you at all times.
So when they get on the SkyTrain, how do they know if they're saying I'm Jane Doe, or, how do they know?
Is when they run your name, right, because they run your name when you're it's not to increasingly described in police,
Yeah.
but when the VPD detains you or arrests you and asks for your ID, and they run your name, if your name also shows up as having an outstanding immigration warrant, then they know that you have an immigration issue, and they'll
No,
turn
I
you
yeah, I
to
understand that part, but I'm just talking about the people that they're getting for whatever they're getting on the SkyTrain for, not paying their fare.
And a lot of folks don't have that ID, right?
Well, that's my point, so
Yeah.
how do they issue a ticket? If you just say, just make up a name.
Capri, why don't we chat about this in the back, because I'd really like
Sure,
to get
yeah,
some of the
yeah.
videos and the photos taken, but not everybody can do that at once, so if people are interested in taking part in that, we'd really appreciate it, and I know Hamza and I are gonna be alternately taking video and photos, so if we could get people to come on back, and also, even if you're not interested in that, I really encourage you to take a look at all the information that Deepan's put out in the back, so then So I'm happy to take photos in the back if anybody wants to kind of